work for it, ride for it. I'ma organize for it, stay up in the night and in the morning I'ma rise for it, heart for it, mind for it, ears for it, eyes for it, peace and a place on this earth for me and mine for it, work for it, ride for it. I'ma organize for it, stay up in the night and in the morning I'ma rise for it, heart for it, mind for it, ears for it, eyes for it, peace and a place on this earth for me and mine for it.
Welcome, Money Power Land Solidarity Podcast listeners. We're really excited. We have a special episode today. We wanted to cover an ongoing story in the Twin Cities. So we're joined here today by two unionizing workers from Tattersall Distillery. Could you introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Linda Moncada. I'm a server at Tattersall in the cocktail room.
And I'm Krystle I bartend, serve, and I'm a manager on duty from time to time.
Cool. So maybe a way to just dive in. Could you tell the story of how this unionizing effort kind of came to be? It seems like something that really came to a head this summer. Could you kind of talk about the lead up and how you all switched into union organizing mode?
Yeah, sure. It's kind of a long story, so I'm going to try and keep it short and sweet. So basically what happened after COVID hit the Twin Cities, the cocktail room did close for a minute. And up until recently, what was it, around like June 7th, I believe we got an email. Mind you, this is like still, a lot of us live in South Minneapolis. We were definitely still kind of like recovering from the uprising. We did get an email requesting our availability alongside a PDF of their COVID manual, like their procedures and policies they were going to enact. And we personally felt like it was really too vague. It didn't address any actual procedures we would be doing. There was no mention of hazard pay. And at that time, we just felt like it was not enough to offer our availability back. So in response to that email, as a group, we sent an email basically stating that we would like to meet as a group to discuss this stuff further instead of just like agreeing to something we're not sure we're agreeing to. And after we got that email, there's a bit of a back and forth with management, and management expressed disappointment in us for not expressing our concerns sooner. And that kind of like broke our hearts, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Just because we don't know when we were supposed to, we didn't even know they were working on a plan. Like this was all news to us. We were a little like shook by that. And then from there, we had talked a little bit more and more and realized that it'd probably be in our best interest to unionize.
Wow. And like, in terms of when that initial email came and you all as a group responded to it, was that just from like organic communication channels? Like you all just were in touch with one another over the pandemic, or was there already kind of a talks of unionizing?
No. So the reason, it actually kind of flowed easily because we all had paused with that email, right? It wasn't just like one person trying to influence anybody. So a lot of us are friends and a lot of us work in community together. So off to the side, we were kind of having our conversations when we got the email, like, yo, did you read that plan? Did you get that email? And everyone was just on the same page about it. At first, it was all 18 front of house staff on, we decided to all Zoom and talk about it. And Then it ended up being after that, coming together pretty quickly because, we only had a week to give our availability. So we just like got a meeting. We were like, yo, what is everyone's thoughts about it? And then from that 17 of us continued to move forward about how we were going to write a collective letter. Because the other things we wanted to address, especially in the spirit of how everything has been gone down in the city, was racial equity. We're like, this is our time right now. We can address this as well in this meeting. We got to talk about the safety first and foremost, because this plan doesn't make any of us feel safe. We don't know the logistics of how this cocktail room is going to run. And then we want to talk about having some sort of training, conversations, meeting, the needs of the community as a place that is kind of a gentrifying force in and of itself. And like, we were like, let's bring all of these conversations to the table now that we're kind of starting up again. And you guys just sent out an email, with your like corporate plug of George Floyd talking about systematic racism in this email, talking about overhauling the MPD. Okay, well then we're going to ask you to like act on your words in this beautifully written email. All we're saying is like, okay, then what do you have to show for it? And then to be met, like Linda said, with that email in response, that's essentially like, oh, nah, you know, we kind of were like, wait, what do you mean?
Yeah.
You know?
We didn't expect anybody to actually follow through when we said R.I.P. George Floyd and put the sign in the window. It's like, that's enough. Now back to getting this money.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So there's this initial email that kicks off the conversation. You all collectivize, send the response back, and then realize like, okay, we got to organize. We got to unionize. What happens next?
Yeah. The really important part I meant to add to that was their response back was not only expressing their disappointment, but also now that they were going to, the new terms were going to be that we had to have one-on-one meetings, not the collective meeting. So it was already, we were like, oh, this divide and conquer shit. We're seeing that right off the bat. And then in addition to that, then we'd re-interview for positions. Mind you, we had been getting emails from the get saying that our jobs would be back once COVID was over. And we all understood how that like we understand it's not going to be all at once. We knew that things would change, hours would be different. But again, we just wanted a conversation how that would go down. But now this was no longer even about jobs back and having that conversation. It was you have to re-interview. And to like really the icing on the cake there was they said, we're going to be doing that to bring outside candidates to improve the diversity. So they took our suggestion.
Wow.
But the POC still had to re-interview.
Yeah.
Like Krystle and I were, as POC, we were like, why do we have to re-interview then?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And also it was just it was messed up, right? It was
messy.
like, nah, we're first of all, like, yeah, we want more diversity, but any diversity we've had in front of the house has been our doing.
Right.
With the little power we've had. We recommend our friends. We're the ones who pushed for like more female bartenders. We were like, there's so many cis white dudes. We got to like change this. We're the ones who've been making and implementing change in the front of the house. That back at their office, lily white, cis hetero, like everywhere, PR team, sales team, management, bosses, like all of them fit under this like very narrow umbrella of a demographic. And so it was also just kind of mind blowing that they were like, thank you for this suggestion. We agree. We should diversify. Y'all got to re-interview for your jobs back because we're going to try to fill them with POC. It's just like, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like one of my hopes for this interview and like already, you know, raise my own consciousness reading about your struggle and your efforts is like really identifying union busting techniques or ways that corporate actors or profiteers will try to, you know, co-opt social justice language, co-opt the mood of the moment. And I feel like that idea that that's somehow a racial justice move to force all these employees to reapply for their jobs, that's like very snaky, and I'm sure they won't be the only group that will try to deploy that tactic. Wow. So what's the organizing process been like since that? I did read, it seemed like you all did eventually have a sit down with the management. Could you talk about that? And then maybe let's start there and then I'll jump into a few other questions.
So basically after we had contacted our local union rep, from that point on, you kind of do have to be pretty like hush-hush about it, unfortunately. We basically signed our union cards. And so we had initially scheduled a group meeting with management, and we had decided that at that meeting, so basically after you like are like, yep, we're doing the unionizing, we signed our cards, you have to basically address management and be like, hey, we've unionized, will you recognize us? Right. And so at that meeting, I believe it was June 24th or 25th. I might have my dates a little mixed up. We basically went in and management was under the impression we were going to talk about this like COVID plan that they had prepared. But we took it as an opportunity, since we were all gathering like IRL, like in real life, we took it as an opportunity to like make our union known. to management. And basically how that went down is we walked in, we did have our union rep with us, and management did notice that and immediately addressed our union rep and was like, why are you here? And then the union rep had like passed basically the floor over to our bar manager, who then basically read out loud that we've decided to unionize. You have basically this amount of time to recognize us, blah, blah, blah. And management was not happy. We had like some scoffs in there for sure. And then after we had finished reading the letter to management, they had given us their COVID plan that they said they had been working on for a month and a half. Mind you, we had not been. We were never asked about that plan. Like, what do we want it to look like? And it was 3 pages long, not double-sided. And that we kind of chuckled because it was no different from the initial COVID plan that they had sent us. Like, it was just like a rewording of the same plan they had already tried to give us. Again, no mention of hazard pay. PPE was only masks. No, they did not address like whether or not if you're immunocompromised, like how they were going to deal with that. It was pretty bare bones. So we just basically like took those packets they were going to give us, and we just walked out. And while we were walking out, actually, we overheard management addressing some workers who were still there, the distillers. Basically, management was like, do you support this union? Blah, 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 which is actually it's illegal
Absolutely
to do that.
illegal. Yeah.
After we hadn't made our union known, it's illegal for owners and managers to address employees about the union after that point. And our union rep had like ran back, because we were like walking down the parking lot, had ran back to be like, hey, you can't do that. Like, that's illegal. You need to leave them alone. You can't ask them questions. And in this time, we witnessed the 2 owners get pretty angry and like, puffy chest, and was like, okay, you need to leave. To our union rep, they said, you need to leave or else we're going to call the cops. And mind you, this is like not even a month after George Floyd's murder.
Right.
And a week after a letter addressing George Floyd and the MPD.
Right. From management. Yeah. So that was like pretty jarring. And I think that threw a lot of us, especially the POC who were there and present, just being like, because we know what calling the cops is for POC. It's a death sentence.
Absolutely.
And so to hear that come out of our like boss's mouth, who supposedly has, our best interest in mind, it was like super jarring and only affirming that like, okay, this union is necessary for my safety.
Absolutely. So is it cool if I read something from the owners one time? It says, transparency is important to us as a business, which is why we want to share this update with you. This week, we were informed that some of the Tattersall front of house and bottling staff are seeking to form a union. As always, we greatly appreciate all views and opinions, but believe that it's crucial for all of our employees to have the opportunity to express each of their own individual choices. Flexibility and adaptability are core to who we are as a small business, and we believe they are traits that have helped us survive and make a positive impact on our community. For those reasons, we don't believe a union is necessary, nor is it in the best interest of our employees or our company. And then it goes on kind of to restate that, over paragraphs. I'm just curious to hear, like, how does that feel after, like, the work that you all have been putting into unionize, or just the experience you've had? Like, what's your response to that statement, or, like, anything that really stands out or that you want to speak back to about that?
Well, for starters, that language is, like, classic union busting.
Absolutely.
That's also, like, a classic, like, capitalist, like, trait to value the individual over the collective. So for me, that was kind of just like an eye roll of a statement, just because it's also like a known fact now that like 90% of us who are eligible for that union are in favor of the union. So it's this whole like we want to like, hear everybody. It's like, well, we kind of are everybody.
Yeah.
But you would rather like, value like the individual over the collective is just like, it's a bummer. It's a bummer.
It really is. I'm glad that you said that because, I'm also fresh off of a unionizing campaign. I work in a nonprofit, and we are formally recognized now. We're going to announce that to the world next week. But this language is copy and paste the same way our management was trying to dissuade us from unionizing. This idea that like we don't want to step on the individual rights of every single person, but not acknowledging the fact that we had total consensus that people wanted to join the union. Or the idea that transparency is important to you, but you took 2 months behind closed doors to develop this plan that somebody else was going to have to implement. Where was the transparency there? You know, it's just so obvious union busting language. And again, like, I think you all are really doing us all a great service by exposing this and, you know, inoculating other workers who want to organize against this same type of language. So that's my understanding is that's where things are right now. There was a demand for voluntary recognition, and they use this bullshit about we don't want to silence anybody's voice. So they're right now pushing you all towards a NLRB election. Am I right about that? Mm-hmm. Could you kind of talk about how you're prepping for that, or maybe even you started to break it down, Linda, like you unionize, you sign your union cards, and then there's 2 pathways, right? You go to the management and you declare your unionizing drive, and they can voluntarily recognize you right there. Then the process, you're formally recognized as a union, and you could begin bargaining, negotiating. The other option is they refuse to voluntarily recognize you, and then you have to go to this National Labor Relations Board election. Could you kind of describe that for our listeners, like what that election is going to look like and how you're preparing for that?
Sure. So basically the election is like a yay or nay vote. There are kind of 2 types of elections that can go down. So there's one that can be done through the NLRB, which under the Obama era would have only taken 2 weeks, but under the Trump era now, it takes up to 4 weeks, if not longer. And in those 2 weeks or now 4 weeks, basically in that time, business owners can hire folks outside of like the core group of union or workers who want to unionize. And that's like a classic union busing thing to basically dilute the vote. So what we had been pushing for is an outside election, which would be a total neutral state. Like it would not be like geared towards anyone specifically on either party, which would just speed up the process, which would just be a quicker election. It could happen in like 2 days.
Oh, I never heard of that before. So you can not go through the National Labor Relations Board, but have an outside body come certify an election, and then management would agree to abide by those results.
Correct.
Interesting. I didn't know that was an option.
Yep. So there's 2 options. Usually businesses will not opt in for the neutral vote or the neutral election because there is this route to like, you know, enhance union busting with that timeline. I mean, I think it's pretty telling that like under the Trump era that timeline was extended to 4 weeks instead of 2, just on basis of like what's the best for the company, whatever.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of what happens next. So right now, basically, we're in this election process right now. We're just waiting.
Yeah.
Waiting to see what happens, waiting to see what management does. Like we don't know what they're up to. So we're just kind of like, honestly, I'm anxiously waiting for the next update, the next email, which is not fun.
It's a stressful experience to unionize. I know like our process started before the pandemic and well before the pandemic, and then bled into the pandemic period. And then when the COVID first hit, it was looking like we might face a NLRB election. And at that time it was disbanded and we weren't sure if we would even be able to have an election. And I just want to acknowledge that too. I'm sure you all are going through a lot of stress, not just the stress of life before all of this, but then you're doing a thing that's very positive and rightly gaining support, but it ain't easy. It's not like a glamorous thing that y'all are doing. It's really hard work.
It's really hard work and it's not glamorous, but for me, it's worth it. Just because the service industry notoriously does not have unions or has much union support in that sense. And as someone who's worked like a 14-hour, 16-hour shift, like it really sucks. It's not easy work. It really is not the best environment to work in. A lot of unfortunate habits come out of working in the service industry.
Oh, yeah.
That don't get addressed. And like, we're just hoping that through our story, I guess, more people can like realize that it is important and that it can be done. And we're hoping by doing all this hard work, it makes it easier for other service industry like establishments to unionize.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. I feel like I was raised by service industry workers, and I've known those dynamics. And then I think now with the pandemic, people are starting to realize how much of our economy rests on the back of service industry workers. And even though they're serving you and waiting on people all the time, they're like kind of invisible, and not really understood as full people. And just to recognize like it's a very powerful arm of the economy that like the workers should have a lot more control and reap a lot more of the benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also, like, my dad is an immigrant, grew up working in kitchens when he came to the States. Like, it really means a lot to me too, because my dad never had protections.
Hell yeah.
And I would really like to see undocumented workers like have a voice for once.
Absolutely. I know for me, when we kind of formed a critical mass and kind of recognized like we got a union, we're organized. One thing, a mentor of mine that I went to when we were beginning our unionizing process was helping me out. And the one thing he kept reminding me was, you got to get the union, but it's more important to be organized than to be unionized. And like, if you think about the ways that I think some of the old business style unionisms that people have kind of been grandfathered into, some of them have lost that organizing spirit. So there's unionized employees who aren't necessarily organized. And it sounds like you all are organized and now fighting to make it official and be unionized. But like when we went through that process, I remember it was like a really affirming and powerful moment for me to look around and realize like, damn, we're doing this. We did this. I'm curious, like, have y'all had any moments like that, or in this organizing process, what stands out to you in terms of like what you've learned, how you felt, both like things that have been affirming and positive and then things that have been challenging?
I think I was surprised how quickly our first meeting came about and how everybody was on board. Not shocked, but just like, oh, this all came together really quickly. And I had been stressing, and I know everyone had been stressing, because every day in the city, as we've all experienced here, was so unpredictable. We had no idea what the next shit would have to be and what occasion we'd have to rise to. And I know a lot of us were tapped, and it was just like, okay, here's this thing, we got to address it. And I just had so much anxiety around how this meeting was going to go, and a lot of that had to do with feeling powerless. And I'm someone who, especially at that place, have always felt, comparatively to other industry places, like we do have some autonomy here, right? But it almost goes to show how fucked the system is, that you get into this psyche of being so grateful, not wanting to step on toes just because this place is a little better than the other place, right? And so I was in that position there. And I know a lot of us were just kind of like, well, what can we say or do? And thinking that this email or this letter back, it felt really empowering to just have asks that we thought were so basic. And we've passed this letter along I have to talk to attorneys about it, our union rep, other people, because we weren't even thinking of a union in that first meeting. We just wanted to address things. And we thought, given that we're a quote unquote family, this would kind of be an easy go. And so for the response to be what it was, I think, and I'm like just pretty cynical person as it is, but to be taken so off guard by how they viewed that, and that so much was built into ego, that these people who supposedly value our work, these people who've worked alongside of us, one of the owners used to be a bartender and has worked alongside with other employees before Tattersall. For them to respond in this way, I think, and to deem it as betrayal because some of them have reached out to others in our group that they're closer to, and we're just trying to talk like person to person, like what is going on. I've never felt so betrayed. That to me was a moment where I felt, yes, I still feel like, what can we do? How far can we go? But it was such an eye-opening, like, I can't settle for less, because this is, you're showing your true colors, and it is way more fucked up than I ever thought it was, you know? And like, I never bought into just because you're a small business doesn't mean you guys aren't like any other capitalist scumbag. But I did think, because we had relationships, because we were so quote unquote valued and had that autonomy, that we could ask for a basic ass meeting on racial equity and safety, and that could be met with no problem. And so to get that retaliation, we were like, oh no, y'all just the same.
Yeah.
You know, y'all like, we're not up against anything any different than the man, right? And like, I wish it weren't like that. And I know that a lot of our coworkers felt really heartbroken in a different way than probably Linda and I, because like, we grew up in this fucking system as, you know, POC with immigrant parents. And so like, we know what this shit is. Right. But I think some of our white coworkers, especially ones who've been in the industry for a while, were like, I can't, like, dumbfounded, you know? And not because they're stupid, but because like, they've bought into a sort of the rhetoric we're told around this family thing in the industry, and that our labor is a gift to us, what we're getting from them, when it's like, your idea to make this place, any of these capitalist ideas, fucking Amazon, these restaurants, any store, you had the privilege to materialize that idea. The only reason the rest of us or any other person who didn't go to an elite college or what have you, their ideas that are just as good, if not better, didn't materialize because they didn't have your damn path. So don't sit there and act like we should be so grateful for our fucking 11, 12, 13 an hour when you're making, and that's the other thing too, is with industry specific in the restaurant and bars, they like to play, or it's treated differently because those owners don't get paid in the same way as like a tech, you know, founder right off the bat, because so much is going back into the bar, so much is going back into the restaurant for so long because, you know, the rent prices and everything. So yes, they don't make profit for a very long time. It is very hard. They are working 12, 14-hour days. Sure. And that's not our problem. Right. You have to take that shit up with the state,
that's the risk
city.
Of being a business owner.
That's the risk of being a business owner. And if you guys have a problem with that, that's not about exploiting your fucking workers then so that you can make a profit and that you can thrive and survive. That means you take it up. Right. Just like we're taking it to you, like this isn't okay. Y'all need to organize and you need to take it up. But if you can't fucking run a business without exploiting people, I'm sorry, my dude, then you can't run a business, you know? And we shouldn't settle for any less.
Yeah, that all that really resonates in terms of this idea of like how pacified and how austerity, like the poverty that is really surrounding us all the time. If you get a job, maybe like Tattersall, where it might not be as bad as like, you know, whatever, Applebee's or something, a corporate gig. And for me, being in a nonprofit, for so many of us realizing like, man, we can't really complain though, because it's like, bro, I got a good job compared to like, you know, I feel like I got damn near survivor's guilt because I'm like, I get to wear whatever I want to work. I get to use my mind and stuff. And then realizing like, wait a minute, we're being exploited. And the more that we acknowledge that gives courage to others. And that is such a disciplining tool for people to like hold over your head, that like everybody in the working class is really like one paycheck away from utter despair and destitution. So it's like, that's a big way they keep us from organizing, I'm realizing. And then I feel like also, because I want other nonprofit workers and service industry workers to organize and unionize. And if it feels like family at the workplace, a good place to test that is see if they get excited when you're talking about unionizing. Because it's like, if we're family, if we're a team, if we're a community or whatever, then it's like, why are you fighting me on this? And we got fought pretty hard too, and it really exposes, and like a lot of that rhetoric just masks the same class exploitation that is the foundation of our economy.
Right. 100%. Something you just said that kind of resonated is like, I got it good. What is good? You know, where does that standard come from? And And that's something that during this entire process, I mean, even before this, I was like contemplating, like, what is good? Like, is this job good to me actually? Like, why am I working so hard and feeling so like, I remember like after my like late night shifts coming home at like 1:30, the next day I had to take the day off. Like the day, like my Friday, the day after, I considered it a work day because I couldn't move my body.
Yeah.
Like my feet hurt so bad. And I bought like $300 shoes and $100 insoles and it hurt still.
Yeah.
So like, what is good, you know? Like, yeah, I had quit my last job because it wasn't good enough. And I got this job because I thought it was better. But now I'm just like, I don't know what good is.
Yeah.
Like we've been living under this guise of like, this capitalist guise of good and bad. And, you know, it's just like, no, not anymore. I'm like, it's not good enough anymore.
Hey.
Never was.
Real shit. I feel like that is a profound affirmation to take out of this whole year, is to realize like, no, this isn't good enough anymore. We shouldn't have to settle for this. And
We should have never settled for it.
I hear you. That's like, it's moving to hear you say that, because I think about my mother, you know, like waited tables, 2 jobs my whole life, and just the wear and tear on her body and the wear and tear on her mind and her spirit. And then to realize like, then I went to college and started being around other people and realizing like, damn, y'all got dental insurance and health insurance and y'all go on vacations and stuff. Like my parents just work to the gristle every day. And it's like a part of why I'm so inspired by what y'all are doing, because I feel like that's for them too. You know what I'm saying? Like that's for all of our families who had to work. And the reality is, part of the reason I do feel so thankful at the nonprofit is because like, a lot of my family really did have to do shitty work that's even worse than that. We all know that. So it's realizing though that we're in solidarity with those folks. Like we have to organize. And if we're in a slightly more comfortable position, it just gives us more responsibility than to push the envelope. Could y'all talk about something I seen come up a couple of times following y'all story, was a PR firm connected to Ivanka Trump?
Yeah. Yo, that was amazing. I looked up, so we got word, somebody had texted me and was like, did you know about this PR firm that because they called Tattersall or something for a statement, and this PR person responded and said that they would get back to them. And they're like, did you know about who this person is? And sent me who they were. And then I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, it's something with, I think this, like it's a fancy PR firm in New York. And so I looked homie up and saw that he works under this firm that's, I think, it's by the name of the CEO, the founder, and it's a person who represented Ivanka Trump and as a PR and eventually stopped. But it's still, I was like, time out. And I think everybody was just like, time out. You could afford these people in New York, but you can't pay the distillers hazard pay.
Right.
Like, pause, you know, we were just like, I don't understand. And obviously they got new lawyers because whatever they were doing before was failing them hard. Again, we didn't have to do much. They were kind of blowing themselves up at that point. But yeah, that PR firm, I was like, even with that, exposing that. And I think it was funny to hear reactions. I think speaking to what you were saying earlier about like the process and what's been going on, negative, positive, one of the things that I think keeps coming up, and that was interesting about this, was because it's Minneapolis, because communities, period, everybody knows everybody. And especially when you get into a specific industry of some sort, people know everybody, especially the restaurant and bar scene. You hear things pretty quickly. And we had been getting word of folks on their side kind of going around talking about if anybody wants to hear the real side of Tattersall's to reach out to this individual. And people did. And it was funny because we were like, what real side? We like, again, here are the emails. Here's what went down. You know, this isn't just word of mouth. We're showing you straight up. We have recorded John, you know, saying that he was going to call the police on Shay for just saving his ass from getting sued for confronting the workers, right? We got the receipts. And what's your side? And we soon find out that their side You know, and that's indication one that they know something is like they're fucked up on their part is this PR firm.
Right. That specializes in like crisis
management. And like, let's say, sure, and I think part of that too is like, nobody ever thinks of themselves as the bad guy, right? Nobody in this world. And that's why I hate painting things as good and evil. I hate character smearing campaigns because like, at the end of the day, you could take anything out of context, any line, any moment, and make anybody look like the devil. So we weren't trying to do that with this shit, right? We were like that obviously got us shook, that moment about the police. So we bared that shit on social media because that was our lives.
Yeah.
Right.
And so we were like, these are the people who sent out this email about George Floyd, and then this was an instinct. That's not to say this human is a horrible individual, et cetera, et cetera. That's not a character smearing. It's to show that white folks, white men of privilege, don't blink an eye before doing something that could have cost one of our lives, even a week after he wrote some shit about George Floyd and overhauling the police. What does that say? That's not talking about your fucking character. It's not talking about how you're evil. We're not trying to hurt your poor feelings. It's saying you need to check in with yourself and figure out and understand how awful that was and where that comes from, right? That's not just an isolated moment. That's speaking to a psyche. So that's what we're saying here with all this shit too, is like, y'all keep coming back to us with how you feel betrayed, and God, if I hear one more time about their intentions, right? Their intentions, everybody's intentions, like we had your health at best interest. Yeah, and obviously we don't think you don't. That's not what we're saying. Once again, we're not saying you are the devil. We're saying you didn't do it right. We deserved a meeting. And that's shared by everybody who looked at your Instagram and saw that you were talking about transparency, and then you shut their comments off. So that's why you needed a PR firm, you know, because like, not because we effectively tore you down with propaganda, but because you keep messing up and you don't even have it in you because your egos and your privilege to sit and think, shit, we messed up. Not we messed up in a strategic way. We messed up because we got shit to learn, right? And that's probably at the end of the day, all any of us would have wanted to at the very beginning was an apology and to make things right. And they never did that. And that's why we turned to the union, because we had our hands tied behind our back and because our unemployment was threatened. We were also told through whispers in the office that they were just not going to respond to our very last email and that they were going to just stop our unemployment the following week. Like, are you kidding me? So many of us live paycheck to paycheck, and that because you are so salty that we organized, you were going to just cut that shit off. And I have no doubt they'd come out and say that was never a plan or intention. That's bullshit. Somebody in that office told us that. So sure, that didn't happen, but that came to your mind without a thought. Again, we don't have to character smear.
Yeah.
Y'all just laying it out.
It's a short step from everybody has to reapply for their job.
Right.
You know, it's like basically the same thing.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. I feel like a commonality between our campaign and then other organizing campaigns I've seen, and what you all are saying is just how ego driven and how defensive management will become, how it's like really perceived as a personal attack, and realizing that it's like, that's not what this is. This is about like a different structure. This is us having collective power, and anybody who has my best interest in mind should not be offended by me exercising my right to unionize or my, inclination to connect with my fellow workers and express solidarity. So that's like another thing to prepare for folks entering unionizing campaigns, is like people do catch hurt feelings, and that's just like, that's on them to deal with. And it's not what this is about at all. And that's like something to do with like the psychology of management and ownership or something like that. I had one other question I was curious if y'all have any thoughts on. It's like connected to the unionizing drive, but also beyond that a bit. I heard you both mention the words gentrification, since we've been together today. And I grew up in Northeast Minneapolis, and Tattersall to us is like a symbol of gentrification. It's like, and to think about even this, how offensive it is for the ownership to call the police, is recognizing that like Central Avenue has been a site of police violence in my own life and the life of many people in Northeast Minneapolis. The cops Northeast super aggressive, and they're right down the block from Tattersall. And a big part of the project of gentrification was violent policing to kind of make Central Avenue feel safer for people. So I'm just curious as far as like what I've also learned though is that my class interests, y'all are not my enemy. The workers at Tattersall, you know, it's like you didn't buy the building. You're not setting the rent prices. You all are struggling to pay rent where, you know, maybe in Northeast or over South. So I'm just curious, like how that comes up in your work at Tattersall, like in your time there, have you wrestled with gentrification, you know, and like how it shows up in this space? And then curious, like if that stirs anything about your unionizing effort.
Well, as someone who works on the floor, I see it all the time with who comes in.
I bet.
I used to live in Northeast when I first moved to Minneapolis. I'm originally from Chicago. I live in South now, but when I lived in Northeast, I mean, yeah, of course, gentrification is apparent everywhere.
Yeah.
To, you know, old historic like homes getting, you know, demoed for like some real ugly, like boxy looking, you know, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's in every aspect of
Definitely.
it, no doubt.
Yeah.
So working at Tattersall on the floor, it's like, yeah, there's always like really like just uppity white people who come in all the time that I have to like, you know, appease. And I, you know, unfortunately I get groped a lot on the floor by these people.
That's terrible.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
And like, you know, I do bring it up with management. Does anything get done? No. It's really terrible to witness. It definitely like, tears my soul apart to just have to like work this job. But unfortunately, this is the job I have to work.
Yeah.
There's like, I don't know what else. I mean, the service industry runs rampant with like who they cater to.
Absolutely.
In terms of like, you know, who gets weighted on the best versus not.
Yeah.
And like, it's a really hard thing to fight against because I was probably the most recent hire there. So I didn't have much of a voice to begin with. And that's not something that like the service industry will offer new hires. It's definitely hierarchy there. So it's like, I can't really do much or say anything. Again, like Krystle had mentioned, like the front of house at Tattersall has been any diversity in the front of house is done like by the front of house, not management.
Yeah.
So that's like the best thing we could do for ourselves was just like, you know, because we come from communities that are not gentrifiers. Like,
Yeah.
we don't have gentrifier money.
Yeah.
This is where we work. This is what I have to do. I have to work 14 hours a day.
No, real shit.
Yeah.
I think on that tip, it's like the way I think of it and feel, because I grapple with that so much, you know, being there, having been there for 5 years, I was like and every person that I am close to, my chosen family, they're every year, every month, they're like, why do you still work there? The mental, you know, obstacles you have to go through, the things you have to listen to, what's being said to you, what's being said about your coworkers. And I think for me, similarly, it's like, right, you look at any place, any corporation, Target, Amazon, McDonald's, who runs does the grunt work in the floor, right? Does that mean that those individuals are contributing to, you know, the fucking greed and the what have you? People need work. And
Absolutely.
For me, especially what I thought and the reason, and like, principally, I think it's a privilege to principally be able to choose your work, right? Like I'm not going to work for a chain, fuck a chain, because chains are shitty and evil. And so I'm going to work for like a small business or something that's just starting and what have you. That's a privilege to be able to say that and to be able to get that choice, right? Not many people have that fucking choice. They got to work where they live because they don't have a car to transport, what have you. So to me, it was even just a privilege to be able to choose to work at Tattersall. And the reason I started working there was because I was like, this is starting. Yes, it started by two white guys from the burbs. And, you know, no, they're not from wealth, but they're certainly not from poverty either, right? And so even though it's two white guys starting this place in Northeast, I think for me, and you could call it just being straight up naive, I thought, we can make it into something different. We can make it into something that can like puts into the community. We can hire folks from the community. This can be this can be something different. It can, as it's existing, might contribute to gentrification, but we could reverse it in some way or compensate for its existence by actively doing things, right? And that proved near impossible over time. I mean, I thought it was going to be from, first of all, getting more diverse workers, getting people for events, having events there that would draw Black and brown people in, working class people in, not just the suburbanites. And I couldn't believe how hard that was and how much it was a very lonely job for us to be doing, and that we shouldn't have had to have that much weight on our backs to make that happen.
What's funny, or it's not funny, but I thought you were the owner. Because I was, we did an event at Tattersall.
Yeah. If only.
And now I'm like, oh shit. Like, because it's like, now I'm realizing you were going out of your way to do just that.
Yes.
And, and we had a successful night, but again, we weren't bringing in the numbers that a corporate event would, And so I just, again, like the reason I bring it up is because I feel like your unionizing drive and unionism, worker organizing is a way to subvert that dichotomy of gentrifier versus gentrified, and it's really to understand that, like, yeah, we're comrades. We have the shared same class interest. I'm not trying to block people out of the neighborhood. And the more that workers who are in these establishments that are in the context of gentrification, I feel like the more that workers organize, the more then we could see different pathways forward, and the more solidarities could be built, as opposed to just oh, fuck that place or whatever, or to even give ourselves more agency when we are forced to go to work in these places that we know are the real estate component or the clientele component there's a violent dynamic there. It seems like worker organizing is one of the most productive ways to create new possibilities. I think that's really inspiring, and I think is really positive.
Yeah, it's I mean, when I was quitting my last job before Tattersall, I knew someone who worked there through my last job, and I knew Krystle had worked there. And honestly, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna work there because Krystle works there.
Real shit.
And I'm like, because at my last job, I didn't work with any POC, and it was never something management cared about to hire POC. So I was like, I got to get out of here. And I went to Tattersall because Krystle worked there. And it's really amazing how much code switching happens on the floor. Krystle and I, we have our jokes. We talk our language, and then I go back on the floor and I'm like, and then I, put my white people voice on and be like, and how was your drink?
Yeah.
And just to do that, the emotional strain of that sucks. It sucks. It is not fun. But even just having Krystle there and the other POC there just to kick back a little bit was so important.
I bet.
And I just wish more people could have that.
Yeah.
And I think too, kind of just speaking to the larger component of this in that is for me, this whole, what I didn't think was possible when I was working there. And again, it was always through these micro ways, and I'm in school full time, and my path and my passion has been environmental justice, right? So it was always this thing that was taking so much out of me when I was and I fucking hate the industry. I hate the industry. This is just a job I have to work. I hate the industry though, because even though food and drink is very fucking important to my culture, to every culture, and I believe it could be something special, the way that food and beverage is in this country, the way that the industry is run is purely privilege. And I want to figure out while I'm in here a way to make that better. I don't know how, because I'm always working and I'm always in school and all of these other passion projects. But the industry I know needs to change. But it was always something that was kind of side work because I had other things going on. And now it's become my work, main work. Even school has taken something to the side because the labor movement, as we're seeing all this happen, I don't think people understand that is the groundwork that needs to happen. Everyone keeps throwing around the word capitalism. I'm like, okay, then you got to talk to and organize with workers. This isn't just about, there's so many things going on in the city, so many movements happening, but has to be from the people who are making these places run if we want to dismantle these places, right? And so that's with this, I'm we've got that rally on the 28th, the restaurant, the industry worker rally for our rights. And then on the 20th is the Black strike. And the Black Strike is a bunch of industry workers from different industries, not just the restaurant, going on strike and essentially having this movement for their rights because they've been exploited, right? Black specifically, black and brown. And so for me, it's like, okay, here we go. This is what I wanted to happen from our unionizing, was like, of course, to get our shit underway, but also for it to have a ripple effect. And it's like, we got to use this platform for the people who don't ever get recognized, because right now it's all the hot spots, all the hot cocktail rooms, all the breweries, all the fucking bougie restaurants that are going to be getting the eyes put on them when those workers start moving. But what about the McDonald's?
Yeah.
Right.
What about those spots? That's what I'm concerned about. Like those black and brown people, the undocumented workers on the lines in the back of the house, the faces that never get recognized, seen, or respected. Those people who do not for a minute think, like that the McDonald's corporation or any of these corporations can be moved, because why should they? Nobody's helping them. Everyone, like whenever there is a movement, it's starting from a place of privilege. And so for me, it's like, we've got the momentum. These places, everywhere's on their knees right now because of what COVID's doing to them. Everybody's got time off. We have energy. We're pissed. And especially because our livelihoods are on the line, we have nothing to lose. These people, they have everything to lose. That's why everyone, like the blink of an eye, they're sending out these apologies, these fucking emails, Black Lives Matter, this and that, plugs, right? Because they know what's going down and they're shook. Everybody's shook. And they shouldn't be if they weren't destroying, the people, the worker, and their lives, and we're the ones on the front lines all the time. When all the uprisings happened, those white people went to their cabins, went to other towns. And so it's like, we have the time, the energy, and the fucking anger. And so I want us to actually have that solidarity, that it's not just about, the places that can do it. We got to go out there for all the restaurants, all the places that don't.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. I feel like that's the spirit, of this decade, is like international, intercommunal solidarity, and really understanding that the workers do control this economy when we organize. And like, we're coming out of a period of like brutal repression, but more and more I see that flame catching, and I like that spirit of it. It's like organizing our shops and organizing our various industries, and then also recognizing that like, we're connected across industry and across difference. And, as a nonprofit worker, it's like, and a service industry worker, we're still workers, and getting to a point where we could all strike and we could all move in coordination, and we could really build the infrastructure for a new society. I think that seems like a good amount of time. With that said, kind of in that spirit, if you were to, any words of guidance or support or inspiration for somebody who's listening to this and maybe works a service industry gig or, is struggling on the job, what would you say to somebody?
I think for me, one of the most important lessons I've gotten out of this, or maybe another reiteration of this lesson, is that there is power in numbers. I feel like, as I mentioned before, capitalism kind of pushes this idea that the individual is more important than the collective. And after, the uprisings and everything, all this mutual aid that's going on and being organized in the Twin Cities has just reiterated this idea that it's okay to have the same ideas, and that it's really powerful to have the same ideas.
Hell yeah.
And work together on that front. And this union thing was just reiterating that again, strongly, that it's okay to all feel the same. We don't need to be original with our feelings in this way. Obviously you should and you can, but when it comes to stuff like this, if you feel like something's wrong, just say something, because I bet someone else probably feels the same way.
Amen. Amen. And how can folks support y'all in the meantime? Somebody's hearing this, how can, maybe, I don't know if Chris, if you want to say those dates again, or if there's any calls to action that we can share with our listeners to support your efforts.
Yeah, I would say, the rally, the food industry rally is happening on the 28th, to show up for that. And also But before that, the 20th is the Black Strike, and that's Monday, right? 20th is the Monday, and that's going to be happening from Minneapolis in the airport. And I don't remember at St. Paul. There's a movement there for the Black Strike. So definitely show up.
You can find all that information if you Google search Fight for 15.
Yep.
Okay, awesome, cool. And you all are working with Unite here, correct?
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Well,
And we do have an Instagram.
what's your Instagram?
It's at Tattersall Union, and we post slides about like why restaurant workers should unionize. We post like current events going on, and we do have like a call to action, which is just basically like call and email our owners to voluntarily recognize the union. So those are all on our Instagram if people want to follow and be up to date with that stuff.
Hell yeah. So follow the Tattersall Workers Union on Instagram. We're honored to sit with Linda and Krystle, workers who are organizing at Tattersall Distillery and encouraging all workers out there to organize, and sending a lot of appreciation and support to the workers at Tattersall. Thanks for tuning in. Money, power, land, solidarity.
We need money, land, solidarity. If you funny, stand very far away from me. We have running plans about as far as they can see to keep them coming.